if you want 1,000 ideas about what kinds of levers to explore, listen to Uri.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's great to be here. I want to start with a story. In 1988, I was 21. I just finished my military service in Israel, and I went to Europe with my sisters. We went to Florence, and we saw David. I don't know if you saw him. It's a remarkable place. And for 25 years since then, I kept thinking about it. It's a remarkable thing. And this spring, I had the chance to go back. So I went back to Florence, wanted to see what happened with him. At the time, when I was 21, I looked a bit like him. And I wanted to see, am I still going to be impressed? And that's what I saw, right? So time didn't work well for him. He aged too. And that's part of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about incentives and behavior in general. And the problem with using incentives for behavior change is that some of the behaviors that we are trying to change already have huge incentives behind them, right? So imagine a 55-year-old guy, overweight, goes to the doctor tells him, look, if you'll walk half an hour a day, your life is going to be so much better than if you'll keep sitting, you're pre-diabetic, it's going to be, the near future is going to be horrible. And this guy doesn't walk half an hour a day, right? We're not talking about running a marathon for health benefits 40 years later. We're talking about something immediate and not that difficult, and yet people don't do it. How can you introduce incentives into an environment in which the incentives are already so strong? My daughter is 19-year-old, and she smokes. She understands all the health issues around smoking, but it's going to happen when she's 50, 60. That's like never, right? So she doesn't care about this. How can you use incentives to change this? Now, how many of you would like to exercise more? Stop smoking, right? So those of you who don't have a habit that you want to change are really boring, right? So I hope there aren't that many of you like this. It's really, we all have something that we want to change. In many cases, we have really, really strong incentives already in place. And we, as economists, as behavioral economists, we try to go into this environment and change the behavior. And that's what I'm going to try and explore. Like Paul said, we recently published a book, John List and I, and I'm more or less going to follow the principles of the book. It's going to be about standing basically on two principles, behavioral economics and field experiments. Then I'll give you 3 examples. Then we'll have some Q&A, and then we'll run a short experiment with you. If you have clarifying questions in the middle, just feel free to ask me. Okay. So what's behavioral economics? What is behavioral economics? Many of you probably heard about it. It became more popular. There are other books, other successful books that talk about it. And what is it that we are trying to do? If you look at the traditional economist, that would be, like Mr. Spock, logical, self-interest, doesn't make mistakes, profit maximizer. Really, like I said, a really boring person. If any of you, if you go to a conference of macroeconomists, for example, they'll talk about interest rate and unemployment all day until 6, then they'll go to dinner at 6, finish at 8, go back to their hotel room to work, right? They're very high on the autistic spectrum, right? It's really boring people, right? Those are smart, maybe they don't make mistakes, but those are not most of us. If you go to behavioral economists, they are much more like this guy. Right, we do make mistakes, we have limited attention, we care about other people. We are just, much more interesting than the typical classical economics person that we looked at. And those are the kind of people that we want to study, right? So if the 55-year-old overweight person was like the Mr. Spock, he wouldn't be fat, right? He has some issues because he's a more interesting person, and that's what we try to introduce in behavioral economics. It's important for me to say that I'm a big believer in incentives. In that sense, I'm not different than traditional economists. I believe that people react to incentives. The problem is that in many cases, we don't understand their incentives. And if we understand their incentives, maybe we can design better ones, right? So if we understand what really motivates people, we might be able to do a better job at actually motivating them. So as I said, it's going to be very simple. And now I want to go into field experiments. Field experiments are extremely important. That's why I call this the biggest lab in the world, or whatever, biggest economic lab in the world. Field experiments are important. What are field experiments? We go into the real world, and we run experiments with people. Very often, they don't even know that they are part of experiments, that they are taking part in an experiment. And we try to learn what would people do. The difference between looking at big data, for example, and looking at field experiments is that we control the environment. Each time we change one element in the environment. And if we change only one element in the environment, we can learn about causality. Stuff that we could not understand just by looking at data, we can really learn from running the field experiment. So that's what we try to do. The world needs this, right? So if you look at companies, think about the example that I like is Netflix. So Netflix started in the late 90s as the Robin Hood of the world, right? So it was, Blockbuster was controlling the world. They were really nasty to the customers. They were a monopoly. Blockbuster came and really changed the game. No late fees. We are nice to you. CDs in the mail. Everything is good. Then they understood, they had a group of people that understood that, you know what, the future is not just CDs in the mail are going to, the DVDs in the mail are going to disappear. Streaming is going to come up. So some really smart people a couple of years ago decided to split the company to two. So you'll have two different usernames. You'll have to have two accounts. They increased the price, rolled it over nationally, lost 80% of the value of the company, over $10 billion in a couple of months, right? A complete disaster. By now it came back, but how many of you like Netflix? And it's not like that, you know, it's really, they lost lots of their reputation. They're not what they used to be. It's very hard to rebuild the brand name that they had before, right? It was a huge mistake. How could they have avoided it? Instead of rolling it nationally, they could have gone to San Diego, the Bay Area, whatever, choose a small part of the country, try it over there. Very simple, just say, okay, dear customer, we are running whatever in San Diego with 40,000 people, and we want to see the reaction. They would have seen the reaction and would not have to suffer the $10 billion loss. A very simple field experiment, right? Not something sophisticated, not something that cost them, you know, we're talking about $10 billion versus, I don't know, $100,000, right? And they didn't do this. They just tried to think like, you know, Mr. Spock will sit around the table, put some very smart people, and come up with a solution. That's really a bad way to look at the world, I think. In many cases, when you can really run an experiment, that's what you should do. You can learn much more about the world. Now it's time for the examples that I have. Right, so incentives and habits. That goes back to the David example that I had over there. We wanted to see whether we can pay people, we can give people money. I asked you how many of you want to exercise more. Many of you said yes. So can we just use incentives to make people go and exercise more? We took a group of students at the University at UCSD, and gave them incentives to go to the gym for a month. So we gave them $100 and asked them to go to the gym 8 times during the month. Now, if you give students $100, you can get them to do almost everything that you want, right? It's easy. So it's not surprising that during the time that we send them to the gym, that we ask them to go to the gym, they actually went to the gym. We can get their data from the magnetic card that they have. So we know that they did this, and they went more often than the group. We have a control group that didn't get incentives to go to the gym. That's easy. The question was, what's going to happen after we stop paying them? And you can think about two hypotheses, at least two hypotheses. One of them is what we call crowding out, and that's stuff that I worked on before that. So my favorite example, because it includes my research, now it's 15 years ago, my 2 daughters were in a daycare. We lived in a suburb of Tel Aviv, and they were in a daycare in this suburb. We had to pick them up by 4 p.m. from the daycare. We used to go, my wife and I used to go to Tel Aviv to eat in a good restaurant and then drive back to pick them up. And one day we were late. So I drove like crazy because, you know, you need to pick up your kids by 4 p.m. That's what you do. Then the principal of the daycare introduced a fine of 10 shekels, $3. If you come more than 10 minutes late, you have to pay $3 fine. We went to Tel Aviv, traffic. This time I didn't drive like crazy because I'm not going to risk my life for $3, right? So we had an experiment. We had 7 daycares in which we introduced a fine, 3 daycares in which we didn't, so a control. And what we saw that we were not unique. Once we introduced the fine, more parents came late. Right? We increased the late coming parents. Now, it's not clear why yet, because it could be, for example, that I think that, okay, now I'm paying for the service, so it's fine. Right? So we had, after a few weeks, we dropped the fine. So no fine again. So no fine, fine, no fine. And we saw that now that people got used to being late, they didn't go back to being on time. Right? So it's not about paying for babysitting services. It's really about changing the norm. Right? So think about my co-author on this one, Aldo Rusticchini, is Italian. He said, basically, now it became an Italian equilibrium. Everyone is late. Of course, what do you mean? 4? Yeah, we'll be there sometime, right? Or you can think about before that we lived in the Netherlands, and over there we were late once, 1 minute late, and the teacher stood at the entrance to the daycare lecturing us for 15 minutes. We wanted to kill ourselves, right? We would never be late after that, right? So we just moved from that equilibrium to this equilibrium. That's how it seemed. And something else, before that we didn't know how bad it is to be late. She told us to be there at 4, sure, but is she really, really upset? Is she going to do something bad to our kids? Or maybe she has to stay anyway. We didn't know. Now she told us it's $3 bad. If it's only $3 bad, that's fine, right? So it really changed the equilibrium, and that's something that could have happened over here, right? We are paying students to go to the gym. Maybe now they'll say, oh, we shouldn't go to the gym at all. Now, it's important that in the daycare case and in most of these cases, if the fine was large enough, you wouldn't have a problem. So if it was in some places in the US, it's $5 a minute. $5 a minute times 2, that's $10 a minute. I would have driven, I would be there on time. It's a good reason to be there on time. I heard, the nicest I've heard is that somewhere in Paris, one of the schools in Paris, if you're late to pick up your kids, the teacher takes the kid to the police station and leaves the kid over there, right? So then you have to pay for the therapist later on, right? So the size of the fine is important, but the fine can change the meaning of what you're doing. And it's true with fines. It's true also with positive incentives. So here's an example. Paul, you're my, say that I meet Paul in the bar, and I tell him, you know what, Paul, I really like you. I would like to have sex with you. I offered him already today once, so I'll try again. Twice in a day, right? Maybe I'll get lucky, who knows, right? Now imagine that I do the same, and I'll say, Paul, I like you, I'd like to have sex with you, and I'm even willing to pay you $10 for this. Right? That might be counterproductive, right? This $10 might change the meaning of what I'm talking about, right? So using incentives, using money could be bad in this case, right? It's important to see that, money carries a different meaning. I'm going to a conference on the meaning of money tomorrow, right? So that's why I have to be in here. Money carries a meaning with it, right? It's not just, so if it was a flower or chocolate, that would have been different, right? But Paul gave me cigars, 2 cigars for today. If he would have given me $20, I would be insulted. The cigars are nice, right? So that's the kind of things that we have. So that would be one hypothesis for the exercising thing. If I pay the students to go to the gym, once I stop paying them, they're going to be less likely to go to the gym. The alternative hypothesis is something that we call habit formation. Now, we don't really define what we mean by habit formation. It could be that, the first time you go, it's smelly, you don't like it, and you don't know what to do. After a month, you start to enjoy the smell and whatever, right? You know what to do on the machines. It could be that you just found a place in your schedule. Right now you know that Monday and Thursday morning you go to the yoga class at 8 a.m., whatever, right? So you just fit it into your schedule. There could be many reasons. It could be some chemical reaction that you have in your body. All we care about is, as policymakers at least, in the first stage is, can we pay people to do something and see that they do it? And that's what we found, actually. The results showed that the group that got the incentives, got the $100 to go to the gym for a month, was twice as likely to go to the gym in the coming 3 months, right, in the period when we follow them after that. So the fact that you got into this habit got you to actually do it more in the future, right? So you got people into a routine, and they were more likely to do it in the future. So a very small use of incentives could be important in this case. I didn't say that this work is with Gary Charnas, who is a professor in UC Santa Barbara. And we have a follow-up study in which we looked at these students. Those were freshmen at the time. We looked at them 2 years later. And we asked them, a series of questions. We found out that they're not exercising more. So the effect was true for the first 3-4 months. Then they went into the summer break and it disappeared, right? It didn't work. What we did find is that academically they did much better, which is something that we try to replicate, because if it's true, it's quite nice, right? So imagine that you spend, $50,000 sending your kid to Stanford. And if you want them to increase their grades by, 0.5, all you have to do is pay them $100 to go to the gym. That would be nice, right? That would be cost effective. What's nice about the incentives is that you can also work on yourself this way, right? So if you want to exercise more, you should convince yourself that you should go there for the first month, because the first month is going to be bad, but then you'll get into some kind of habit and you'll do it, right? So that's one example of the use of incentives in order to get people to do what you want. But in many cases, and that's the next thing that I'm going to talk about, you pay people money, and companies pay lots of money, and it's what we call money for nothing. The incentives that companies are using don't work, right? And we have lots of examples in which companies give money, and we don't know. You don't measure the outcome. Any company that you have around here has a wellness program. If you don't have a wellness program, that means that you don't like your employees, right? So the company invests lots of money, millions of dollars in this wellness program, without any real measure of success. If they have a measure of success, usually it's done by the company that actually provides the wellness program. And surprisingly, they find that it's effective. When you do measure it, you see very little effect. And that's an example of something that I'm going to show you. It's not a wellness program, but it's an example of money for nothing. You use incentives, and you get no effect. So the company we worked with, Humana, it's a very large health insurance company. They have many members that are on Medicare. So over 65, Medicare, and Humana has good incentives to keep these people healthy. As long as they are healthy, Humana makes money. If they're sick, it costs Humana money. So Humana really wants them to be healthy. That's a great thing to have. In order to make them happy, to make them healthy, they give them incentives to do screening and preventive medicine. So hepatitis B, flu shot, cancer screening, those are things that are really important, and they know how much money it saves them. So they know that if you're 80-year-old and you have whatever heart condition, if you take the flu shot, that's going to save them $7,000 in expected costs of emergency room, right? So they really know this. It's really useful for them. They want to motivate people to do that. What do? They have a list of 30 of these activities that people could choose from. And they gave people $10 for every activity, up to 5 activities. So that's the regulator says that you cannot pay more than $10 per activity, up to 5 activities a year. That's what Humana did. So you could, if you did all 5 activities that you chose, you could get $50, right? Up to $50. And that's what they had in 2010, 2011. In 2012, we made a very simple change, very, very small change. Now, instead of getting $10 per activity that you do, you get $50, but only if you do 5 activities. If you do less than 5 activities, you are not being paid. Very simple change, right? So before that, if you did 2 activities, you got $20. You see where I'm going. Now, only if you do 5 activities. Why did we do this? I may get the flu shot even without the incentives. I go to the pharmacy, I get the flu shot. If the pharmacy or the doctor will offer me $10 for doing this, sure, I'll take it. I like money. Why not? But you didn't change my behavior. That's the money for nothing thing, right? You gave me incentives to do something that I would have done anyway. You wasted your money. And that's what we wanted to see, whether now we're going to see. So if our hypothesis is wrong, we'll see that everyone jumped to doing 5 activities now. And we'll see a reduction in the others. So we had lots of people, lots of observations. millions of observations, and that's what we found. What we should take from this one is basically that's some kind of ratio. For some reason, less people did 0, more people did 5, but most of the people didn't change. It did not change the number of people who did 1, 2, 3, or 4 activities. So we removed the incentives. So before that, when you did 3 activities, you got $30. Now you get 0, and there is no change in the number of people that actually do this activity. Humana was paying money, looking at the results, saying, yeah, good, we have lots of people that are doing 3 activities, but actually, no, it didn't change anything in the behavior. It was money for nothing. They saved $25 million on this, right? So it's not a small peanut thing. That's indirect costs. The actual cost, it cost about $1 to send every dollar. So it's the actual saving was about $50 million just by this very small change in the incentive scheme that they got, right? So test it. Don't just assume that your incentive scheme is going to work. You have to actually test it, and it could be very expensive. You know, Humana spent lots of money trying to incentivize people to do good things. So it's not something bad, but it just wasn't working. Yes? Yes?
Surely that's the wrong framing of the problem. Because if you really look at cost savings, we ignore the healthcare.
Right, but we didn't see a difference in the healthcare, right? We did not see a change in the number of people who did it. Sorry? We don't see a difference in the number of people that do the activities. But the same number of people that got the flu shot in 2011 got it in 2012. Now it's working. Yes?
Okay, so let me repeat the question then. When you look at many businesses, there's kind of the accounting hat, which focuses on the easily measured cost saving.
Sure.
And then there's what I might call the strategic hat, where you look at the outcome triggered by the event here. And it's not clear to me that the distribution, I mean, clearly there's the behavior that you describe exists.
Right.
But by framing the problem, you have to look at the outcome in terms of health consequences.
Those are the outcomes. So the outcome is not the healthcare. This is not money. What I have over here is not money. It's how many flu shots were given, how many cancer screenings were done.
I would argue
this
in healthcare that's not an outcome. That's a productivity measure.
Paul is saving me. No, the point is that these are the number of activities. So we have the same person that got the flu shot in 2011 also got it in 2012. That's the outcome in my perspective. I don't control the disease. I just know that what Humana incentivized didn't change, right? That's the main thing. That's what I care about. So otherwise, I wouldn't work with them. I wouldn't have worked with the company that wants to save money, but it costs something in the health of the people, right? That would have been a really bad thing to do. We have the money for nothing. Now I want to talk about regret as incentives. So regret is something really strong that influenced people. So my grandfather came to Israel in 1948, and they didn't have money. They were Holocaust survivors. He bought a lottery ticket. It was, I think, 7-digit number that he bought then. And then for the rest of his life, 40 years, he bought the same ticket every week. And if he was traveling, he had someone else buying the ticket for him. And he wouldn't give it up. Why? Because imagine that 1 week you don't buy it and the number comes up, right? That would have been a disaster, right? You don't want to have this, right? So this kind of regret influences much of what we do, right? It's not just my grandfather. There are many examples of this, right? And we know that people like lotteries, right? Lotteries is something that we all really, really like, and that's what we wanted to put together. Lotteries and regret. A couple of years ago, I went to the Gates Foundation. It's a new building in Seattle, a new campus. They have about 1,000 people that work over there. And they have about 500 out of the 1,000 workers come with a car every day. 500 come without a car. And the city of Seattle really cared about not increasing traffic in Seattle. It's something that was important for them. So they wanted the Gates Foundation to incentivize the workers to come to work without a car. So they gave him public transportation, they charged a lot for parking, and they gave him $3 a day. That means $1,500 a day were given as incentives for people not to come with a car. I think that, $3 a day, it's nice, but it's kind of trivial amount. And, the question is, can we do something better than this? Can we improve on this kind of incentive schemes? And here's the experiment that we designed. So we went to a company that has these workshops, a week-long workshop, and people are promised free parking. But then they're told, look, when they show up on Monday morning, this group, the first group, we're talking about 10 groups in each one, so it's lots of people, more than 300 people in each group. For the control group, someone shows up before them, in front of them before lunch and tells them, look, we promised you parking, but driving is bad for the environment. If you can get without your car, it's good for the environment. That's the control. Second group, the same speech before lunch, but then it says, you know what, if you don't want us to validate, if you'll come but don't need us to validate your parking ticket, we'll give you $5. Right, so we give you $5 incentive. This group, they said, look, if you won't show up with your car, you're going to be entered into a lottery. At the end of the week, we're going to get all the names of the people who came without a car into a box, pull out one name, this person will get $500. That's nice. The last one was the same, with one difference. We put all the names in the box. Some of them we mark with a check, they came without a car. And some of them we put an X, right? They came with a car. And then Friday comes, I pick up a number. Oh, John, you won. Oh, but you came with the car. Sorry. You put it aside and you take someone else, right? So now you know that you didn't do this. Now imagine that you would have done this in the Gates Foundation. Everyone would know this, right? Everyone would talk about that. $500 is not a huge amount of money, but you can think about other things that you can use. And that's something that could motivate people, we thought. And this died. What did I do? Here it is. That's the result. What we see, that's the number of people who came without a car. We see that $5 were statistically not different from the control group. A bit more people came without a car, but not statistically different. The lottery was more useful than the $5, and the lottery with regret was much more useful. Now, if you look at the cost that the company paid, when they paid $5 for every person who came without a car, it cost them $52 for every time that someone came without a car. Because they had to pay all the people, including the people who would not have used the car anyway, right? So they didn't change the behavior. Again, you should use the incentives just to change the behavior of the marginal person, and they paid everyone. In the lottery, it cost $13 to remove one car, and in the lottery with regret, it cost $8. It's nice because the company knew what's the shadow price, so they knew how much they can rent a place in the parking garage for the day, which was around $13 in this case. So they knew that lottery with regrets work, lottery, paying $5 is a really bad idea. So now we have time for questions. We have time for questions, and then we will run the experiment with you.
I had a question concerning the incentives and habits.
Right.
With the students, how do you know that there was not an effect? I mean, you said that when they went away for the summer that they stopped exercising. So I'm curious, how do you know that the $100 was only an amplifier to a structured environment that they were already in versus, say, in the summer where it may be less structured? How do you know that?
Right. So I think it's a good question. And the fact that they went to the gym is not really enough, because maybe they go to the gym instead of, in San Diego, instead of going surfing, for example. Then you did nothing. If instead of playing basketball, they go to the gym, that's not, it's a waste of your money. That's not what you wanted. And it could be that, you just changed something that, it's not what you wanted. We did try to do this measurement. So we took their blood pressure, pulse, weight, all these things. The problem is that in San Diego, the typical subject that we had was, a 19-year-old Asian woman that weighed 90 pounds, right? So there was nothing to move over there. We should have done it in other parts of the country, maybe, where we could have seen more of an outcome with that. But I think it's a great question. So we don't know. There are many things that we don't know about how incentives to exercise work. It's just, starting. Yes.
My question is about incentives for groups that want to rebel, or there's a mixed bag of people who want to rebel against the accepted behavior, because my company does quite a bit of work with teenagers. And part of our thinking has been that some teenagers, if you actually say, behave this way, they want to do the opposite.
Right.
And I'm wondering what your experience is with groups where you have that kind of mixture of people who purposely want to go against, what you tell them to do, and finding ways to properly incentivize them.
Right. So you remember my two daughters from the daycare? Unfortunately, they grew up, and now they're teenagers, right? The 19-year-old, 17 and 19. If you find a solution to how to incentivize teenager, please let me know, right? I'm still looking for it. Again, some incentives are motivating them. It's just that you need to find them, right? And the problem with, in many cases, if someone just doesn't want to do what you want them to do, that there is very little you can change. But in many cases, even with teenagers, you can find what works for them. So we also have a son. So at this point, it's easy. If you want him to do something, we threaten that we'll take the iPad. That still works on him, right? So everyone has something that works on them. But teenagers are problematic, and girls are more problematic than anything that, right, yes.
You mentioned one example about companies paying for the wellness program.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what companies from your research can do to how they can best incentivize their employees to perform better or faster or go up like above and beyond and
So I
do
think
things?
that's right.
What is a good way to incentivize them? And if we pick a strategy and go with it, how do we because you showed a bunch of statistics graphs which showed this was worth it, this wasn't worth it. How do we assess that?
Right. So the first thing to do is actually to try and measure your success. Right. So don't just assume that what you do works. And much of the stuff that is done, so it's hard. Many times it's hard to measure. So if your goal is, for example, for people to lose weight, that's usually a very bad goal. Because what you see, and if you look at Weight Watchers, you look at everything, you see it's very easy to lose weight. I lost 2,000 pounds in my life, right? It's very easy to lose weight. The problem is to actually keep this, right? So don't just measure, we have this group and we gave them group incentives like you asked, team incentives, and they lost 25 pounds and we are happy. But then you go back a year later, they are, a few pounds more, right? So start by actually trying to measure the success of your program. So I'm not saying that all the programs over there are bad. What I'm saying is that the fact that we don't have empirical data about them, that's bad. Because many of them are really bad. So we know about many of them that they don't work, right? So try to find, first of all, if you'll run enough experiments and you'll find out, you'll get the data, you'll see which one. From the data, you'll be able to know which one worked better, and then try to roll those over. But don't just introduce wellness programs that don't work, right? And you can think about incentives. So a simple thing could be workstations, right? So offer workstation with the treadmill, right? That could be something that works. So offer really, we know that nudges, right? So we know that in the cafeteria, it's a very cool experiment. You have a buffet and breakfast buffet, and in one case you have the bacon here and the tomatoes behind, so you'll have to reach for the tomatoes. In the other case, you switch it, and you see a reduction of, I don't remember, but something like 20% in the amount of bacon that is being consumed, right? So it's enough to take it, from the front to the back. You have the diehard people that will eat bacon no matter what. But then you have people that say, oh, I have to do this. Well, no, let's take tomatoes, right? So try to find the smart thing that works. And this doesn't cost you money, and it doesn't upset the workers, right? So try to find what works. We know very little about what works, and we just assume that everything works. So measure, use some behavioral economics, like the stuff I said that you can learn, but actually try to measure and see what works, right? I think that's, we behave as if we know 80% of what we need to know about wellness program, where I think we know something like 20% of what we need to know. That's what I'm. Yes.
Hi. I think your work is really interesting, by the way.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to build on, I guess, the rebellious teenager question a little bit, namely about people who either believe they can't or actually can't do the desired behavior. For example, in the car situation, people who might live so far away that
Right.
they're not going to be affected at all by the incentive because they just can't. Or again,
Right.
people who maybe could but just believe that they can't because they think that the car is really important for them or something like that.
Right, so
yeah.
there are a few layers to what you said. So the first one is, imagine that, I have 2 kids that I have to put in school before I come to work. I just can't use the public transportation, right? And then I get this, that's really unfair, right? So people can be upset about that, right? So they just can't. There are other issues. So cigarette smoking is a great example. Many of us don't smoke. I smoked like 100 cigarettes in my life just recreationally. I'm lucky. I wasn't born with the tendency to be a smoker. But there are other people. We had, my sister had a friend that had emphysema. She couldn't breathe, so she was with oxygen and a cigarette, like that, right? And that's how she died. They found her one morning like that, right? Those are people that no incentives will change it. The tendency or whatever it is for them to smoke was so high that you couldn't change. But most of us are not there, right? So most of us are somewhere in between. So most of us don't have a crucial thing like dropping the kids in school in the morning and then coming back. And they can think, oh, maybe I can bike. Maybe, for the right incentives, I might decide to bike, right? Or I might decide to carpool, right? So the incentives that you target will go through, if it goes to the majority of the people, that's enough, right? Some people you won't be able to change their behavior with incentives. I think that the smoking example is great. The kids example is great, right? It just, even if they want, they just can't change their behavior.
You mentioned earlier that there's an incentive that works for everybody. You just need to find what that incentive is. And I'm wondering if you haven't noticed in any of your research or any that you know of where there are tendencies, are there similarities or differences that, in particular, that fall along socioeconomic or cultural lines?
One of the chapters in the book is about, or 2 of the chapters are about gender differences. We look at gender differences. If you look at Fortune 500 companies, I don't remember the number. I think it's like 3% of the CEOs are women. If you look at any top-level politicians, top-level executives, huge gender gap. Why do you see the gender gap? So you can think about discrimination. You can think about the work-family balance. You can think about many reasons. One of the reasons that we care about is competitiveness. We say, look, men are more competitive than women, and we try to show it in using experiments. Men are more competitive than women. In order to be a CEO, you have to be competitive. You must have a drive, and you must be competitive, because those are really, really highly competitive positions. You don't get there just by, I care about the balance. I'll work 40 hours a week. You won't get there because your competition will work 70 hours a week and will get there, right? So. But now I get to what you're saying. You're asking about culture, right? Well, how important is culture in this decision? Now, culture is not something that we can change in our experiment. You'll come to the lab, I'll assign you to be an Asian woman. That doesn't work, right? It's something that you're born with. So we needed to find a culture that is different. We looked for a matrilineal society. We went to Northeast India. There is a group, they're called Kasi. And it's what's called matrilineal society. So it's not matriarchal. Those are, so the head man of the village is still a man. So all the village level politics is done by men. So it's not the opposite of patriarchal, but it's the most equal society we could find. So women are in charge of the household. So they own the real estate, and it goes from the mother to the youngest daughter. They deal with the money. So it's a much more egalitarian society than anything anywhere else. We asked anthropologists. It's hard to find something that is more. And we tested whether women in this society are also going to be less competitive than men. So you can think about nature versus nurture. If it's nature, then you would expect to see a difference also over there. And I can tell you about my experiment. I talk a lot about my kids now. So the 2 girls, we tried to give them, trucks and dolls. So they used to put the dolls on the trucks and arrange them very nicely, and that's what they played with. Same toys for our kid. He took the dolls, threw them at the wall, and ran them over with the truck, right? So it seems as if there is some born differences between us, but it's an experiment with few observations. But how important is culture, right? The question is nurture. How important is nurture? So in this society, we found that actually the women were not less competitive. They were actually a bit more competitive than the men. So when we went to the matrilineal society in which girls are born from, are raised from day one that, they are equal, they deal with the money, they deal with many of the economic decisions in the household, they were not less competitive than the men. So we showed that culture can change even the gender differences that we see over here, right? And I hope that answered your questions about this.
Yes, hi. First of all, I appreciate your research. It's very nice.
Thank you.
I want to ask about the influences on incentives where it's not financially driven and more like social norms and things, cultural effects for sure. But there's a lot of social psychology research on group effects and dynamics. Certainly the teenager example.
Right.
Peer pressure, social pressure,
Absolutely.
all of that. I'm wondering if you've done any research there. It seems much more powerful. I know you're doing single level factor.
I almost agreed with everything until you said much more powerful. So I don't know how to quantify it. I don't know which one is more powerful.
I tried to
right?
qualify it with scenes.
I know that I agree with you. Peer pressure and these kind of things are extremely important, right? And there is lots of very important psychological question. That goes back to your question about teams, right? How the structure of the team, how do you structure the team and the power in them? Very important. I don't have time to, to go into this now, and it's not my research, but lots of very interesting stuff over there, and it's clearly important. So a simple thing that, I mentioned the gender and competition kind of research. If you put a team of 3 men and 3 women, you get a very different behavior from the men and from the women than if you take a group of 6 men or if you take a group of 6 women. So just the gender composition, which is very easy to measure, makes a big difference, right? And so on. Yes?
The embarrassment of being seen as, having the regret and being visibly not
Right,
there is
right.
more of a
You came with the
social
car,
incentive.
right. I agree with you. I think that we have 10 minutes to run the experiment, right? So last question, and then we'll do I'll tell you about the experiment. Yes?
My company's designing a software platform for sales reps to communicate with the main office, get information about products, and
Right.
help them to sell better. The client at the headquarters is concerned about adoption, that most of these guys don't really want to change. They know how they do
Right.
it. They get around the system fine. Do you have any research or any opinions or recommendations of places to go look in terms of creating incentives where we don't have an unlimited time frame to iterate to find what motivates them?
Yes.
We know they're already competitive, and we don't have at our and we don't have our monetary incentives aren't allowed.
It's a great question. So first of all, it's great that you ask it because it's clear that you're not just engineers in this room. Because one of the things that we try to solve, you look at engineers, they're not that different from the macroeconomists I talked about before, right? They work on solving the technical problems. So I worked with a company, the details are not important, and they invested like $300 million to solve the problem that the error rate would go down from 4% to 2%. For the engineers, they solved half of the problem. If you look at the people, if I'm the consumer, I don't know the difference between 2% and 4%. There is a small chance that it will go bad, right? You didn't do anything for me. And for the engineers, you solve 50% of the problem, right? In general, much of the attention that we make, in many cases, we have very good technology that is not adopted by the consumers, right? So we try to work with cook stoves in India and Africa now. They use these clay cook stoves that are horrible because they carry huge health. There's lots of smoke in the house and in the atmosphere. It's horrible in any dimension. Millions of people die every year because of that. The engineering solution is easy. People came up with the stoves. You put them $50 a piece. They work wonderfully. There are good people in the world that are willing to sponsor this. They give them the cook stoves. They use them as closet. They don't actually use them, right? And the question is, how can you change it? So here's one thing that we are trying to do. Actually, we are putting in an NSF proposal that is due at the end of the week. We try to do, instead of just say that you bring 40 of these stoves to the village and tell people, okay, whoever wants it, you can take it. That's one case. In the other case, you bring 2, and you ask them, we have only 2, and you ask maybe the doctor, or you ask the headman, please find the people that need it the most. And then you come a week later with 2 more. So you create some kind of scarcity in an artificial way, and we hope that this will make people feel that they need to do. I hope that I answered your question, but here's what I want to do with you now. I want to talk about a research, and that's a demonstration of an experiment that we run. It's not a field experiment, what we're going to do today, because you know that you're part of an experiment, but this one was an experiment, right? So, why are people nice? And here's an example in which people are nice. We wanted to test it. We created this rock band. It's called Radiohead, and we take it seriously what we do. A few years ago, they introduced a new album to the market called In Rainbows. And what was nice about it is that you could choose how much to pay. When you went over there, they released it only online. When you went online and how much do you want to pay, basically? People clicked on the question mark. What do you mean? No, it's up to you. People didn't understand, so they clicked the question mark again. No, really, it's up to you, right? You have to decide how much you want to pay. That was the model. We call it pay what you want. And the question is it profitable? Turns out that it is. We don't know the data about Radiohead. I'll show you about someone else, but you can make money this way. But is it more profitable than the old-fashioned way? We don't know that. We need to run an experiment for that, right? That's what we wanted to do. So if we introduce a product in pay what you want, traditional economics would tell you people will not pay. They'll just take the product. Turns out that most people are nicer than that. Remember this? And they do pay for it. This guy, anyone recognizes him? Girls talk. My wife claims that he's cuter than me, cooler than me, whatever. He's a DJ, released an album with Pay What You Want. I think it was his 4th album. And he gave us the data. Unlike Radiohead, he was nice. He gave us the data. Turns out that lots of people downloaded the music. Many of them, 73%, didn't pay, but some of them did pay. On average, they paid $1.49. So if you do the math, he made almost $1 million by releasing this album using Pay What You Want. He's not only cooler than me, he's richer than me also, right? So it's really, it works, right? But we don't know if it works better. For that, we need to run the experiment. So we convinced Disney to run an experiment with us. So there are these rides. It was done in Florida, in Epcot. You go to the ride. They take your picture. That's how it goes. They take your picture. You go through this. You see the screens. You decide whether you want to buy the picture. You see, it has a number, 74. If you do, you get a card saying 74. You go to the store, and you go to the cashier. You pay $12.95, sorry. That was the price at the time. And we had different kind of treatments over there. In some days, people saw the $12.95. In the other cases, they'll see what I told you. Lots of people every day. So we have, again, lots of observations. But the idea is that in different days, people will get a different price, and we'll see how it's going to affect their behavior. And here's what we manipulated. We manipulated the price between $12.95 and Pay What You Want. So in the Pay What You Want day, you went there, and the signs told you, look, you have to decide how much you want to pay today. And we looked at it. We crossed it with charitable giving. We know that companies want to care about the society. So how is charitable giving going to work? So in one case, so the third treatment was $12.95, the regular price, but 50% went to charity. And the charity was Make-A-Wish Foundation, the same charity that we'll use today. Make-A-Wish Foundation is a foundation that helps kids with very serious diseases to make their wish come true, right? So they really want to invest in helping kids. I think that it's something that we all like. Then Pay What You Want, and Pay What You Want, 50% goes to charity. Why did we think that that's interesting? Corporate social responsibility, the 50% goes to charity, is something that we see quite a lot around us. The research shows that that's not actually profitable. If I have if I have my regular price, 50% goes to charity, I'm not going to make money on this. That's what the research shows. I'll show you that it's true over here too. And then we wanted to see what happens when we have what we call shared social responsibility. So it's Pay What You Want, and 50% goes to charity. Why do we think that it's going to be different? Because if I want Starbucks and they care about the farmers, I don't know if I drink the coffee because I care about the farmers or because I want the coffee. So the signal is really very noisy. I don't really learn about myself. If it's pay what you want, I know that I can have the coffee, the picture, whatever it is, the shoes. I can have them and pay 0. So every cent that I pay actually helps or signal that I care about helping the cause. In this case, Make-A-Wish Foundation. So we thought that that might be important. Right? So here's what we found. $12.95, the purchase rate was 1 in 200. Not great, right? That's not what you want as a company. 50% goes to charity. Didn't increase it by much, right? Pay what you want, as you might have expected. It jumped a lot. So now it's 8%, 16 times more. And, yes. Anyone want to guess what happened with pay what you want and 50% goes to charity? 30%. 16, more than 8. Actually, only 4.1%. Why? Before that, in this case, the pay what you want, these people really love Disney, but they don't like pricing in Disney. So if you looked at the line, it was, oh, Steve, don't pay so much. 50 cents is enough. Now 50% goes to sick kids. Everyone is in line. They're much more, quiet. And they pay much more. Oops, sorry. They pay much more. In the pay what you want, they pay 92 cents. When you're talking about sick kids, you don't go and pay 92 cents. Right? So if all you're willing to pay is $1, you prefer not to go and get the picture. Right? Because you feel that that's really bad to go and pay only $1 when, the money goes to sick kids. So people actually avoid doing this, which I think is a cool result. We have some more results that support this. In general, just by moving from pay what you want, from the $12.95 to pay what you want, the company could have earned something like $700,000 additionally in this ride per year. Right? So it's a lot of money. Why do I think it works? It works because we talk a lot about how the company should make the consumer trust her more. Right? So if I'm a company, I want the consumer to trust me. We don't talk a lot about the company trusting the consumers, which is a big deal, I think. So a company should trust its consumers. In this case, by exposing itself to the pay what you want, it exposes itself to, the customers can really do bad things to me now. I'm willing to take part of the risk in order to give money to charity. And we think that that was the difference. That's what made the difference. So here's what we're going to do. Here's the experiment today. There are 25 books, I think, outside. You can buy it outside. The price, well, it's pay what you want. Like I said, it's an experiment. You have to decide how much you want to pay. Half of what you'll pay will go to Make-A-Wish Foundation, and the other half will cover the costs of the books. There is a stand over there, Eric. Eric is our assistant for today. He will have envelopes over there. You go, you take an envelope, you put as much money as you want, including 0 in the envelope. Put the envelope in the box. The book is yours. I hope you'll enjoy it.
So now there's a 5.
What else? Flowers?
Break. That's actually unusual for BayCHI to let people have a bathroom break, but that's what the next 5 minutes are, and it's what you can.
Thank you very much.